Speaking of which, though, that's a great segue to revisit top 10 teams on the road this week.
Finally, man. Vandy stole our thunder. We're finally talking about this game. I was mad we had to bury the lead here.
So we had 4 games that we featured, and we asked the question, were any of these top teams in danger on the road? Now, the general consensus was that maybe Missouri could certainly lose. And I picked Washington to beat Michigan this week. Well, both of those happened. Both of those happened in very different ways. But what we didn't count on was Washington we didn't count on Missouri and Tennessee and Michigan and USC all losing in the same day, which was amazing. And we'll start in College Station with an absolute splattering. Texas A&M wins 41-10, guys. Where do you want to start? Trey, I know we had a referendum on Eli Drinkwitz's road record. We had the weird situation with a blanket and a personalized letter showing up in Theo Weiss's hotel room. Mike Elko put a couple of people on blast in his press conference. Just take it and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, Drinkwitz got taken to school today. That entire Missouri staff, it was cathartic, honestly. It's an A&M podcast. It's not an A&M podcast, but if you're new here, not an A&M podcast, but we are all Aggies. The vibes were high in our company group text during this game. 500 yards of offense for Texas A&M. Mizzou looked like they couldn't do anything right on either side of the ball in large portions of the game. A&M scores on 7 of 9 possessions, and one of those possessions was just running the clock out at the end of the half, and the other was with the backup quarterback. Oh, yeah, and Connor Wegman was back. And listen, I had quite a speech, honestly, prepared about Connor Wegman. Mike Elko ended up saying it best. And Garrett, I think we have a video of his press conference. So we'll let that run real quick, and then I'll kind of take it into my next point because it ties in greatly with what Garrett's saying about not taking one bad week and making a whole narrative out of it.
And the last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to say this because it needs to be said, you can challenge Connor for how he plays, and you can be upset about Connor for how he throws a football. Some of the stuff that has been said about this kid and written about this kid, not by you guys have been great, is embarrassing. It's absolutely embarrassing, the stuff that gets out there on this kid. This kid's a winner. He's a competitor. He does everything that he needs to do for Texas A&M football. And there's a lot of people right now that need to stand up and recognize what they've said over the last 3 weeks and take some ownership in it. So from there, I'll open up to questions.
First of all, fantastic that your head coach has your back like that. That's just a fantastic recruiting ad for Texas A&M, that your head coach would stand up there and defend you like that. But man, the fact that he even had to do that because of some of the things, like he said, he's not talking about reporters. He's talking about the idiots online on message boards and on Twitter that just make crap up about kids. I know we like to say they're professional athletes. I know we like to say they're getting paid. They should be able to take it. These are 18 to 22-year-olds, sometimes a little bit older because of COVID, kids that you're just making crap up about. No level of being a fan, no level of investment in a program gives you a right to say a kid is using drugs or doing things behind the back that you have no idea is true. Like, unless you have seen it with your own 2 eyes, you have no idea that it's true. Connor Wegman had one bad game and 75 to 90% of the fan base just abandoned him. Marcel Reed goes and scrambles a little bit, and they're ready to just kick the 5-star with the brightest future I've seen an A&M quarterback in quite some time and just throw him in the dumpster. I'm just tired of it, and I'll get off my soapbox and we can talk about the game, but I was so happy for Mike Elko to have his guys back. And, he vindicated himself on the field today with his play, and he did things that Marcel Reed is going to be a fantastic quarterback at A&M or wherever he lands, but he did things that Marcel Reed simply cannot do at this point. And he showed that he is the key to unlocking that A&M offense, and it is a completely different outlook going forward.
Yeah, here. I completely agree. It was really cool to see Elko step up, and he's done that with a number of players. I mean, he is his guy's biggest fan. And he's clearly going to stick with them through the good, bad, and the ugly. Obviously, it's been a lot more good as of late. Texas A&M has won 5 straight following that loss to Notre Dame. I agree with the critics of Connor Wegman. People were very quick to forget what Connor did when he was healthy and the parts of the 2 seasons that he'd played. He had a 16-2 touchdown to interception ratio coming into that Notre Dame game. He looks a little rattled. He throws 2 bad interceptions. And suddenly everyone's saying he's forgotten how to throw the ball and he wasn't that good to begin with. I've constantly reminded people you cannot judge a man off of one single game that we knew he did not play well in. He owned that. He was not ready to play in that football game the way he needed to. Today, as you mentioned, a total 180, I think, on the outlook for quarterback play at Texas A&M. 276 yards passing. Doesn't throw a touchdown or interception, but it's because the rushing game for A&M was just so dynamic. Le'Veon Moss had 3 rushing touchdowns. Amari Daniels had 2 more. He was quick in and out of its reads. He had, by my count, 10 different pass catchers caught a ball today, and that was just a level of electricity that we had not seen from the Aggie offense, guys, in quite some time. I struggled to think of a true point in history to compare it to, just because it's been lethargic and sluggish for quite some time.
Well, and it was the biggest win for A&M over a top 10 team since 1990, which is, I think, pre-AP. And so this is one of the biggest wins A&M's had in a long, long time. Really kind of encouraging to see everything that you've seen just kind of across the board from A&M. Really a complete effort across the board from A&M. Not just on the offensive side, like what Trey was highlighting. Like, yeah, obviously Connor Wegman came in and looked different. This running game is, a lot better, obviously, when safeties have to back up and respect the fact that you can pass. But also, we should probably highlight the fact that this defense was probably, in my opinion, the more impressive unit today, because this is a Missouri offense that came in and, everyone is hyped about them. They got one of the best receivers in all of college football, and Brady Cook is a super talented quarterback and a veteran, and there's plenty of reasons to say that Missouri should put up some points in this game. And that, they had the bye week and they, maybe had some gadget plays and, who knows, right? Missouri had every reason to score a bunch of points in this game. Outside of a busted coverage and a garbage time drive, A&M basically shut these guys out. Like, this is an incredible effort. They're in the backfield. They got north-south really well. This D-line is something else. This is a very good A&M team. And, barring the fact that we maybe find out that Missouri's garbage later, which I don't think is true. I think Missouri is a very good football team who just simply got beat today. If that's not true, then, you have to start asking what the ceiling can be for these Aggies, because this is a pretty good team. And I think if this defense can keep improving week to week, maybe keep trying to limit some of those bigger plays over the top, and especially keep getting points and start to play with a lead like what they got to do today, you might need to watch out, because these Aggies could be pretty good.
So a question for y'all that we'll transition to after a couple of stats here, and then we'll move on. The media has gone from Texas A&M is years away after that Notre Dame loss, overreaction in week 1. How many times has that sunk someone's ship? To Texas A&M is now a contender for the college football playoff. Garrett, you mentioned the defense. They've done incredible work over these last 3 weeks. In fact, I think a key to their success has been controlling the ground game. Notre Dame, the 2 touchdowns or the 2 scores that they used to put the Aggies away in that opener, both came off of big chunk rushing plays. Since that, their last 3 games where they've taken on major rushers, and you could even go back to the Florida game where Montrell Johnson was held to next to nothing. But over their last 3 games, Texas A&M has given up 153 yards to Terrion Stewart, the all-star running back from Bowling Green, Jaquindon Jackson and Taylon Green from Arkansas, and Nate Noel on 46 combined carries, 3.3 yards per carry. So what that means is 2 things. One, none of those established rushers, the identity of those offenses, have gotten going. And number 2, those teams have had to then pivot away from their identity just to try and move the football. No touchdowns given up to any of those guys. Not to mention A&M's defensive line getting into the backfield for sacks, tackles for losses, quarterback hurries. This looks like one of the most complete defensive units maybe in the country. And so I'll set you guys up with the playoff question with, if you can completely eliminate, or at least as close to eliminate, those defensive busts in the secondary, what's the ceiling for this Texas A&M team? Very pliable schedule going forward.
I mean, I think we said in the offseason, the ceiling was going to the college football playoff. Maybe you want to bump up that ceiling to hosting a first-round playoff game now, but that's still the ceiling. If you can take away those big plays, and that's really the main concern on defense right now, then the ceiling is almost non-existent. It's going to the college football playoff and hopefully winning a game or two there.
Yeah, I don't think that it's completely out of the question. Obviously, a couple things have to go A&M's way in order to make the playoff. I don't think that this is a control your own destiny type of team. I mean, obviously, if they win out, they control their own destiny. But
they're still undefeated in the SEC. So
still undefeated in the SEC. So at least there's that. No, I think that I would expect right now a loss to Texas at the end of the season. And that LSU game, I think, could be a toss-up. LSU, not a whole lot on the defensive side. I think Connor's going to move the ball just fine against them. But that is still a really talented offense for LSU. So 9-3, 10-2, most likely scenario for A&M. 10-2 could make the playoff. Like, if your two losses are to Notre Dame at the very beginning of the season and Texas, who's probably going to be, one of those top four, if not like number 5, if something weird goes on in the SEC, they'll be a top team. So if those are your losses on the year, it's going to be really hard to explain how A&M doesn't get in at like number 10 or 11 or something like that. And so I'm not saying I think that's most likely to happen. I think there'll probably be teams that end up looking better and end up playing a little bit better down the stretch. And certainly, A&M's got to go ahead and take this a week at a time and realize that just like you can't change everything on 1 week, you also can't change it in a positive way. We can't just sit here and say that, well, A&M looked really good against Missouri for 1 week, so now they're definitely playoff team or playoff contender. But, you go out and you beat Mississippi State in a couple weeks after the bye week. And, you have, South Carolina, LSU, Auburn remaining on your SEC schedule before you play Texas. You could ramp up to that. It's a relatively soft middle part of the schedule before you got to go play that game at the end of the year. So, who knows what could happen for these Aggies. Could be a fun season, though. It's certainly looking better than if you lost this one or lost one of the previous ones. And by the way, I wanted to shout this guy out too. Let's go ahead and shout out Marcel Reed for keeping the season alive for the Aggies, because in previous seasons, this is where a Max Johnson-led team or a Zach Calzada-led team would have dropped one of these games against Arkansas or against Florida in a bad spot, right? And now you're not talking about that. You're talking about a good win over Missouri if only Connor had been back for Arkansas or something like that. And that's not the case right now. A&M can keep this because Marcel stepped in, didn't make big mistakes, made the plays when he needed to.
I mean, can I add one more thing about this game, Mitch, and kind of like a big SEC picture out of it? I really hate the in October talk trying to figure out how many elite teams there are in the conference. And we got a little conversation going in the comments right now. I hate that conversation because, and John, we're going back and forth with you in the comments section. You're absolutely right. No one is going undefeated, in my mind, at least in the SEC. Even the Texas Longhorns that we're talking about in the comments section, I would bet money if I had to bet if they're going to go undefeated, if they're not going to go undefeated, they're probably going to lose at least one game. That's just how it's going to happen in this new era of parity. So I really don't like trying to figure out how many elite teams there are because we're just getting right back into the fallacy. I can write the narrative about Texas that they're not an elite team because they didn't pull away from Mississippi State until late and they didn't cover that massive spread. I can write that narrative about every single team in the conference now. Mm-hmm. So it's just falling back into the fallacy of trying to write a story based on 1 week. And we just can't do that in October. We got to let the season play out.
Well, and I'll say this too. I think this format now guarantees that we get probably the most deserving champion. And what I mean by that is no longer do you have a Notre Dame who loses one game. Maybe they go on to dominate the rest of their schedule, but because now it's only 2 teams or it's only 4 teams, they're left out. Very similar to last year when we felt like Georgia was absolutely one of the 4 best teams in the country, but the committee decided that there weren't enough spots to secure them a seat at the table. We're robbed of getting to see Georgia, one of the 2 best teams in the country, make a run a national championship simply because they lost their conference championship game. I mean, that system I just find it hard to believe that there are people that say, no, that's a better result. Give me that over a slightly more expanded access that guarantees that we have at least, if you don't want to say the 12 best teams playing, we have the 8 best teams playing for a national championship. And again, we have this in every other sport, and I don't hear anybody complain about that. I mean, that's where I net out on this. You can say that it decreases your enjoyment of watching college football on a week-to-week basis. To that, I say that's a personal problem, because, boy, I had a ball of a time sitting on my couch watching football today.
If your first thought when Vandy upsets Alabama is to complain about the expanded playoff, you're a miserable person, and I don't want to watch football with you. I'm willing to say that. If that's your first thought, like, yeah, get out of here. About Missouri, though, like, I think we do need to talk just really quickly about Drink. I mentioned he got thoroughly outcoached today. Now 6-13 on the road in his career at Mizzou. Only 2 wins over teams with winning records that finished the season with a winning record. And now he's kind of up against the 8 ball. A lot of all the cushion that he's built in. If Mizzou goes 10-2 with losses to A&M and Alabama, I think that's going to be bubble out for the playoff, the way that it seems like it's shaping up right now. So a lot of seasons still to be played, but they lost a cushion with the way that they performed today. With it not being a close loss in College Station, that really, really lost the cushion.
I agree. Missouri, very similar to Ole Miss. It felt like kind of get to name your price on making it to the college football playoff, at least preseason. You were having to really squint to find a reason to exclude them. And now all of a sudden that margin of error has gone razor thin for Missouri. They were getting dragged by the commentators today for, you know what, maybe they are paying the price for playing a bunch of nobodies in their non-conference schedule. We are BC supporters here, so we'll slightly push back on that. But
they look pretty bad against Virginia.
They did. And what?
They jumped out to a 14-0 lead, and then forgot there was a rest of a game.
Hey, told you all to take the over on Virginia this preseason. They're 4-1. 4-1 Who's?
Gracious him! How about that?